What's up, everybody? Welcome in. It's that time of week. No availability today, which means we're back on Wednesday. It's where we'll be during the regular season, Wednesdays, and then we'll be talking to you post game here on the Sooners on SI podcast. I'm Ryan Chapman, hanging out here in Moore. We've got the great John Hoover up in the 918. Boss, how you be?
How about that rain this week, fellas? One day for the rest of the year, we got rain. Oh my God.
I was trapped in a Target. It was one of those things that I like walked in. It was pretty hazy. I was like, okay, it's probably gonna rain. I spent way too long in the spice aisle, and by the time I got back to the door, I was like, I'm gonna need new shoes probably.
Uh,
I hope that Carson, you back with us. You were traveling last week when we potted the great Carson Field down in Norman. I hope you did not run into any kind of that when you were trying to hit the golf course with the pops.
No, weather was great up in Missouri, like you guys said on the podcast last week. Getting some mental reps in up there, playing some golf. So great little 1 day hiatus from the pod, but glad to be back this week.
Well, we've got to buckle in, ladies and gentlemen, because we had our first hashtag controversy of camp that was what I would consider much ado about nothing. Right off the top, VenmoGate has come and gone. If you have been following us on the website or on the Twitter machine or anything like that, Oakland Sooners on SI.com, you know that on Monday nights, after getting back from talking with Bill Bedenbow and a bunch of people, I was trying to chef up some dinner and watch Primal Fear. All I wanted to do with my Monday night was sit and kick back and watch some Primal Fear. We're really enjoying it. And about the time we first discover let's say the first plot swerve, when we learn a little bit about multiple personality disorder, I get a text, and college football Twitter is alight with an alleged Venmo feed transactions, whatever, of Oklahoma quarterback John Mateer. Some of those talking about quite literally labeled sports gambling, USC versus UCLA from 2022, all that fun stuff. We did some digging, looked like a real Venmo feed, cannot verify anything as far as the sports gambling. We quickly were informed, gentlemen, that John Mateer had called Oklahoma, some of the comm staffers, people like that, on Monday night, had quickly explained, yeah, that's not sports gambling. I'm a college kid. If you've ever seen a bunch of college dudes' Venmo feeds, you have to put a subject line on these payments, on these transactions. We put some dumb stuff there. And that was reflected in the fact that Tuesday after practice at about 12:30, John Mateer comes out. He has a statement. If you'd like to read the full statement, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, head over there. Basically, the gist of it was inside joke, dumb thing to put, but I did not sports gamble. I do not sports gamble. I've never sports gambled. And I'm in lockstep with Oklahoma. OU Athletics followed with their own statement saying that basically the kicker, the final line is they believe John. They have no reason to believe that anything is pending on the investigation front or anything like that. And basically, by Tuesday afternoon, I think we would say this is business as usual. Who have I missed anything in one of the dumber rat races that we have run as a society here over the last 48 hours, which is saying something because in college football, we go through a lot of dumb stuff in the off season.
yeah, no, I think unfortunately you hit all the highlights. It is the biggest nothing burger I think that we've covered at Sooners on SI. I think that's fair to say, where somebody tried to make something out of nothing, and it turned into this thing where John Mateer and the University of Oklahoma has to issue a statement. It was over about 24 hours. It was come and goes like that rainstorm. It was here, it was powerful, it was fast, and then it was gone. It left a lot of not damage, but everything was wet afterwards. That's what it felt like. It was so stupid. We're probably people are probably saying right now, why don't y'all move on? Quit talking about it. But you're gonna love this. Being the old guy that I am, with failing memory, I'll admit, but the old guy, I do have some context for you. This is good. I think the dude's name was Boz Vader. Does that ring a bell with anybody? His name is James Conrad. The year was 2008, and he wrote a story online and dressed it up, put it on I don't know how you do this. He created some kind of page, made it look like the Oklahoman, and his headline was two Oklahoma quarterbacks arrested for trafficking cocaine. Who remembers that? Come on, tell me you remember it. Here it is. All right. James Conrad was his name. I think he went by the internet, uh, you know, nickname is Boz Vader. I have no idea where he got that, but he was a Nebraska fan. He lived in Austin, Texas, and he cooked up this story. And Sam Bradford and Landry Jones were the two quarterbacks that he said had been arrested for trafficking cocaine, selling cocaine in August, right as training camp was going on. You guys, this was the most incredible thing. We're all just like, now what is this for real? Of course, we're talking somewhat early days of internet sports writing and internet sleuthing and all that stuff. We quickly found out that it was a hoax, but not before we asked Bob Stoops about it. We asked Bob, we had to ask Bob. We're doing a media scrum after practice one day and said, Bob, what are your thoughts on this report that came out? And he started laughing. He literally was laughing like he hadn't heard it. And this was his reaction, I swear. Who? Sam Bradford? And who? Landry. He started laughing. He goes, Landry Jones? No, there's nothing to that, guys. He started laughing at our questions about this because it was so impossible. Can you imagine Sam Bradford and his personality, right? Trafficking cocaine, Heisenberg or something like that. It was awesome. And this is what that reminded me of. Just some stupid idiot on the internet. And here we go.
Yeah, rhetorical question, more empty calories, cocaine or Landry Jones? Never mind. When you look at it, Carson, I think the biggest runoff effect for this is going to be we're going to have the John Mateer Memorial Venmo slide in every freshman onboarding now in every program across the country.
Yep.
Hey, Venmo stuff can be private. It sounds like John Mateer was A-okay at practice as far as running that thing on Tuesday. And like on the actual substance point, Carson, for like 20 seconds, the other Hoove knows this. We were on the phone a bunch on Monday night as I was just rolling through like, what is there to like write or not write or whatever. All the other instances that I could find of guys that actually got wrapped up in suspensions, things like that, were all stemming from hey, there's a DraftKings account with so-and-so's information on it. Hey, there's a BetMGM account with so-and-so's information on it. Not a Venmo transaction log, which proves nothing because you can put anything on there regardless of what's happening, all that stuff. So I guess the 10,000 foot view is I don't think the NCAA is investigating anything. If they do, we know they're known for their speed, so you'll know in 24 months. The biggest thing, I guess, Carson, was this something that you think could have been a distraction for Oklahoma? Because on Monday night, it felt like it might be something that lives in the ether for a while, and it was pretty much wrapped up by Tuesday afternoon. One practice, it feels like, is all of the reach of this controversy.
I mean, we've been around John Mateer a decent amount since he's come to campus, but even so, it's hard to know how much weight this is going to hold in his head. I'll say the difference between this and something like that Landry Jones, Sam Bradford example that Hoover brought up is the screenshots were legitimate. John Mateer's confirmed that at this point. Those were real transactions. I don't think anyone's ever going to know what those actual transactions were for. It could have been for pizza. It could have been for anything, just college student related. It could have been related to gambling, but I highly doubt that John Mateer would be that dumb to incriminate himself publicly and say, I've been gambling on USC versus UCLA football. That just doesn't check out to me. But as far as distraction-wise, it's hard to say, just not knowing him as well as his teammates do. Everything that we've heard about John Mateer is he is this incredible leader, doesn't really get wrapped up in the stuff outside of football, kind of different from a lot of student athletes in that way. So I think that bodes well for him. Obviously, I'm sure he's had plenty of conversations with Brent Venables, Ben Arbuckle, maybe some other higher up people at Oklahoma, just kind of getting down to the bottom of it, just clearing everything up. So I don't think it'll impact him too much. Good though that it happened 3 weeks before the season rather than 1 week before the season.
Yeah. Although I will
say,
point. If he had come out and announced that he was betting on UCLA in that game, it would have only endeared himself to Oklahoma fans.
Yeah.
There are many Oklahoma fans that I think held UCLA tickets in some form or fashion for that game. Also, Moneyline Mateer, objectively excellent nickname. So if
Good
that,
nickname.
I think that basically the knock-on effect of that is if he plays poorly in a game, you'll see the tweets. Check John Mateer's Venmo transactions. If he plays well in a game, you'll see the tweets from the Oklahoma side. And I think with that, we can move on.
Oh, hey, I got one quick
Oh,
little recap for you
go
on
for it.
this Conrad guy. This is from the Oklahoma, and this is something Barry Trammell wrote back in 2008. This was before Sam's Heisman season, okay, and before Landry. He just enrolled. He hasn't even here yet. Wasn't even a true freshman yet. Here's what Barry Trammell said, and I want you to think about this guy that I'm not. Do we need to say his name? The dude who did this, because I don't think that's his real name. The Deadspin reporter, Aguaido or whatever. This is what Barry Trammell wrote in 2008, and it holds true today. He comes across as a computer geek who lives in a cyber world, talking smack with other college football fans who have left the real world to live in a society that's all keyboard and screen. 2008, I'd like to introduce you to 2025.
Definitely an iPad kid. Whoever cooked this up on the campus of the University of Texas at Austin, I would imagine. All right, we did talk to Bill Bedenbaugh, talked to a couple of interesting guys, Danny Okoye, Peyton Bowen. Love to talk about those guys. But first, let's hit the recruiting news, and then we will close out with camp and all that fun stuff. A little bit good, a little bit not so good, a lot of bit of good, a little bit not so good. However you want to classify it. We just did a nothing burger, so let's start with the positive. Tuesday, on the Pat McAfee show, Oklahoma lands 4-star defensive end Jake Krull, who had transferred into IMG Academy. This was big time, boys. We've talked about it a bunch when it comes to this 2026 class. The structural difficulties Oklahoma was always going to have. It's the first time in 27 years I know you coaches legitimately entered the season on a hot seat, what that does to recruiting, all that stuff, negative recruiting, it exists. It happens. Oklahoma and Texas go heads up, and Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss were also in the room, I guess technically just happy to be there. And it was going to kind of be, you're pitting the two best years of Texas football since Vince Young was on campus versus two really bad years under Brent Venables, one pretty okay year slid in there. And this was kind of the test. 2 years of relationships from Miguel Chavis and Brent Venables versus the flash of Texas. Can you, a guy in Jake Krull who had kind of indicated, I'd like to see it on the field. I like Oklahoma, but got to see it on the field, has seen nothing on the field. And gentlemen, it wasn't a hat. I don't know, Carson, I know that you were watching it for us. I don't know, will we classify that as a necklace? I don't know, but Oklahoma was picked up, and it's a big win for Oklahoma, Carson.
No, it definitely is. And I think it was a chain. I'm not 100% sure, though, as far as what he was wearing. But obviously, like you said, gigantic commitment. I'd argue maybe besides Bo Bentley, maybe the biggest commitment in the 2026 class for OU. And anytime you can beat out Texas in this NIL era, I mean, OU fans aren't going to want to hear this, but there's a big sell to play for Texas in this day and age between their facilities, the money they produce, how successful they've been the last 2 seasons. It's an easy sell, admittedly. The fact that OU, after 2 bad seasons in 3 years, is still able to get a player of Krull's capabilities shows that Brent Venables, the assistants, the history that OU has, still has a lot of credibility with 17, 18-year-old kids. So it's definitely a big win. And I think there's going to be some momentum that comes from somebody like a Jake Krull committing. Obviously, some not so great news on the recruiting front. I know we'll get to that in a little bit later, but this defensively especially, just huge momentum for the 2026 class.
Yeah, so as far as the pendant or the chain, kind of hard to get that message across when you pull it out like that, when you're in a 3-shot with your family on a split screen with Pat McAfee. Hard to get exactly what that is that you're pulling out. But no, that was a good win for Oklahoma. And you got to do it, guys, on a platform like the Pat McAfee show. You know, there's probably I don't know, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people watching that show at any point in time who say, why is he messing with college football? I want him to talk about the NFL. They're waiting, for him to get to the NFL, and you're having to go through this recruiting thing first. Oh, Oklahoma got a kid. Good. Let's get on to the NFL. Meanwhile, there's college fans, college football fans who are saying, wow, this is huge, huge. So good move overall for Oklahoma.
Yeah, I wonder if Pat McAfee's just done dealing with people from Oklahoma between all the Thunder players that were paraded through
Yeah.
post title, all that stuff. I think it's big in a couple of things. Exactly what you're saying, Carson. Like you've got an offensive and defensive centerpiece of your class now, and it's something that Jim Nagy was talking about at SEC Media Days. Is they're going to try and circle back with some of these guys because breaking news, every program believes in themselves, all that stuff. Obviously, if things don't go well on the field, all these guys are decommitting because you're going through a coaching search. I think everyone gets that. If things do go well, then you can circle back around and say you've got Bo Bentley to spearhead the offense, Jake Krull to spearhead the defense, a couple of top 100 recruits. You're going to bring a ton of people in for that Michigan game. If you win that, you're going to carry momentum probably into the Cotton Bowl because I kind of believe if you beat Michigan, you're going to beat Auburn. I see those two things being like hand in hand type situation. And so that's really important there. I think it's Brent Venables. We've never really been concerned about the recruiting. He has that track record back to his first stint at Oklahoma, certainly at Clemson. And the only blip in the radar for Oklahoma recruiting, really, when you look at it from like a class ranking perspective, has been that they're entering a year this year in 2026 where there's a bunch of question marks, and that's tough for everybody to recruit like that unless you're going to be irresponsible throwing around the money. I think it's huge for Miguel Chavis, who's now shown that not only can he win a PJ battle a couple of years ago that was a 5-star big time thing, out recruit Texas. Here you've got the development path of R. Mason Thomas, Ethan Downs. If you could turn Marvin Jones Jr. into something he wasn't at Georgia and Florida State, that's going to be something else that they can recruit on. And I think, too, especially with what happened on Monday night, which we'll talk about here in a second, this is a recruiting battle that Jim Nagy is the GM of, where it doesn't mean Oklahoma has to have the largest bid. You just have to be in the ballpark. We saw that with Fasusi a year ago. That was not a Nagy recruitment. This is a guy in the trenches, a guy coming off the edge that Jim Nagy, green light, said, we're not stopping. Pursue this guy. Keep getting after it. And while you may have limitations of what you want to do at wide receiver, this is the coaching staff and the front office aligning to say, yeah, let's do whatever it takes to bring Jake Krull to Norman and get him to commit to Oklahoma. So I think that's really good vibes, especially after Monday night where David Gross commits to Florida. That's a athlete who's going to play receiver to OU, who you'd felt like for a long time, all the whispers around that is that Oklahoma feels like they're in a good spot. The words that I don't think any coach wants to see, which was Steve Wiltfong's report from the father saying they were doing a little negotiating, I think was the exact verbiage. On the day he was announcing his commitment, it ends up being the Florida Gators. And who, I think that coming back to you, this is just like a case of Oklahoma in the transfer portal showed us that they cannot spend at every single position, or they will not be forced into spending at every single position. And they're not going to overspend at wide receiver. And I don't know what else there is to it if Florida wants to get after it like that.
Yeah, that's something that Jim Nagy said over the course of the summer. I guess he was doing interviews here and there before media days. And with the podcast, the Oklahoma Breakdown, or shoot, I can't remember who he was on.
Yeah, is it the triple option that's Urban's podcast?
That was it, the new one. Yeah, the triple option. Yeah, with Urban Meyer. He said we're not gonna go after a guy heavy, salary wise, right? NIL wise or whatever, rev share wise, just because he's got a 4-star or 5-star by his name. He's got to fit into what we think in terms of salary, structure, competitiveness, heart, desire, talent, the culture. Does he fit culture wise? And, we hear from middle of the summer on that Davian Gross was basically a silent commit to Oklahoma. He's coming to Oklahoma. He's coming to Oklahoma. He's coming to Oklahoma. When it comes time to get down to the numbers, when it's start talking about how much can you pay him, those silent commits have other options nowadays because of the revenue share model, because of the NIL model. So that's something that if you put those two things together, Jim Nagy says we're not going to overspend just because it says 4-star or 5-star. And the simple fact, that he wanted to go to OU, he likes OU, and it's 2025, so he might be here next year. He might be here next month. He might be here in 2028, right? I mean, the transfer portal, as we always say, is always open. But yeah, I mean, that's where Oklahoma's kind of, I wouldn't say things fell apart. I'm not going to pretend to be an insider on this recruitment, but I wouldn't say things fell apart. It was more like he started realizing he had other options. He wanted to go to Oklahoma, started realizing he had other options. And as we find out on the last day, when the negotiations, so to speak, kind of manifested themselves, all of a sudden he's a Florida Gator. That's how recruiting works now.
Yeah, I think agree with it, disagree with it. I think everyone is more than welcome, as always, to form your own opinions there. I'm just telling you, like, I'm not expecting Oklahoma to overspend on like a wide receiver. It seems like that's a pretty clear directive. And Carson, when you look at it, Steve Wiltfong had reported earlier this morning that it was what 4 days ago, 3 days ago, Oklahoma had sent an offer out to Braden Allen, a current Tulane commit at wide receiver from the Lafayette area. Fong said this morning that's picking up all that stuff. It looks like Oklahoma's moving down the line. So I think more than anything, kind of like the big overarching situation is like when it comes to the state of the program, it's a we'll see, we'll find out this year. They'll put a win total up, and that'll tell us all we need to know. It feels like whether it be Giovanni Gibson, whenever he works his way back in here early this year, Satania, Josiah Martin, Keontez Lewis, whatever it is. We'll find out if in year one, kind of running, even though some of this happened in the post or the winter portal before Jim Nagy was here, and then Jim Nagy came on after the winter portal. But that it's a manifestation, a continuation of kind of what they did in the winter portal anyway. If they're okay at wide receiver, then you think people are gonna like exhale a little bit. Never great to like lose these wide receiver battles, but it's just it seems like that's the way it goes.
I think yeah. I think the fans are really going to be interested to see how this year's portal class does because this is such a different receiver room than it was last year. And it's not necessarily a flashy one either. You look at guys like Gibson, as good as he was last year, that was at Arkansas Pine Bluff, an FCS school. Same thing with Keontez Lewis. And these guys could turn out to be stars. I know Lewis, for example, has really stood out in fall camp. Isaiah Satania at Arkansas, he's been really good in fall camp too. But there's going to be a lot of questions, and there obviously already are a lot of questions like who's going to be the main guy? Are these guys going to get us out of this slump that we were in last year? And Nagy, the people that hired all, or not hired, got all these receivers, they didn't go after the big flashy players, but it could work out. And it seems like that could be their directive that they're using on the recruiting trail. They got Daniel Odom, obviously, who's a consensus 4-star. He's in the class right now. He's supposed to be really good, but that's about it. And they haven't made it too much of an emphasis, but maybe that's one of those areas that Nagy was talking about. We want somebody that fits our mold rather than just blindly going after X 5-star or 4-star player.
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to jump in the deep end with a lot of high school wide receivers when the transfer portal is always open. They're going to supplement. That's a position, I think, where you can supplement a playmaker here, some reliable hands there, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely get the vibe. It's like if we're gonna go in for a wide receiver, we better be 10,000% sure that they are CeeDee Lamb. Like that, it's got to be nailed on. We
Yep.
cannot miss this guy. And Jim Nagy's seen a lot of great wide receivers come through the Senior Bowl, and it was kind of interesting. We were talking to Bill Beanbo, and we'll kind of transition to some of the stuff we got on Monday pre Venmo disaster. But Bill Beanbo was talking about the relationship he has with Jim Nagy. Obviously, Jim Nagy's called Bill Beanbo a lot over the last 7 or 8 years just to be like, so you have another awesome offensive lineman that I like to bring to the Senior Bowl. And Beanbo's kind of like, yeah, man, they go out, they find guys for me. They're like, I would like you to recruit this man. And Bill Beanbo's like, sick. That sounds great to me. I'm all the way in. So we shall see there. It was good to catch up with the great Bill Beanbo, though. Last time we spoke to him, he had just discovered Netflix. And with the whole magic of the world at his fingertips, he had said, yeah, I just watch a lot of SVU. That's basically all I do. We did not get the update on the Bill Beanbo what he's been watching lately, but we did get a couple of updates on Michael Fasusi and Ryan Fodje, the pair of highly touted offensive linemen. And I listen, if the hype train wasn't already on its way down the tracks, listen to this. I'm not telling you they're going to start, but they will play. That is Bill Beanbo talking about Michael Fasusi and Ryan Fodje. He went on later on in another answer to be like, listen, I don't, he said like 5 times, I don't heap praise often. I promise. I really promise I don't heap praise often. Heap praise often. But I'm not sure I've seen guys this young that have this kind of mentality. He was talking about Fasusi. He can go out there, get his butt beat by R. Mason Thomas, and then come straight back the next draft and be like, good, I want more, that kind of stuff. And if you listen to the Oklahoma Breakdown from this week, Gabe Eichard had a great play-by-play of a moment in practice where Fasusi and R. Mason were going after it. Fasusi's helmet pops off, Gabe said, and there was some jawing, and Fasusi opted for great offensive lineman move, objectively done move, which was go helmetless headbutt into R. Mason Thomas. These guys are psychos, and they look like $1,000,000. And John, they need to play. I know that Beanbo said they will play. They need to play.
Yeah, you're right. My take on this is that Michael Fasusi and his natural talent, his athletic ability, his frame, his long-term projection as an NFL first-round talent, he's raising the ceiling. He's raising the ceiling for the entire offensive line room, especially at tackles. He's bringing everybody else up. You had a guys. I'm not going to try. I'll try not to overspeak. Okay, I'll try not to be a prisoner of the moment or get too deep into this. But it reminded me of when Adrian Peterson got on campus and everybody said that's your next running back, and Bob Stoops' deal was, I know, but we've got these other guys that are college football players that have paid their dues and have been in national championship games, and for now, Kewan Jones is our starter, right? And by week 4, Adrian Peterson was your starter. That's a little bit of what this reminds me of, in that you've got a guy who's clearly, when he walks on campus, he's clearly physically the specimen. He's the guy that's the best looking specimen. You heard Troy Everett telling stories about sprinting, and he beat me bad in sprints, or I lost my butt to him when we were racing and stuff like that. Fasusi's the real deal. Ryan Fodje also projects that as well, I think. But these are guys who are bringing the rest of the offensive line along with them. Not that they're like leading, or not that they're like in front, but their presence and their participation in practice and their performance has made everybody else in that room, every other offensive lineman, stand up and go, okay, so I'm supposed to look like that. I'm supposed to act like that. I'm supposed to play like that. I'm supposed to perform like that. So you hear these stories about when they get tangled up and trash talk starts happening and temperatures get a little hot. That's a true freshman. It's exactly what you want out of that position.
Yeah, no, totally. I think what always worries me about the high end 4 stars, the 5-star players, is ego, high expectations, thinking you're going to be all that. But from what we got talking to those 2 players and Beatenbo, it seems like that hasn't been an issue since they arrived to Norman. Both the players seem like they have their heads on straight, Fodje and Michael Fasusi. And I think it's really kind of going off of what Hoover said. It's good for some of these returning linemen too, knowing like, hey, we got these stud freshmen. You guys have to step up your game or else. It kind of is one of those things that just gives you a little bit more competition on the line. And after what happened last year with the line, 8 different starting lineups in the first 9 games, you kind of need that a little bit. And having these 2 guys who, I don't remember the exact quote, but Beatenbo pretty much said, for their age, both of them turned 18 a couple weeks ago. They are the best, more or less the best players that we've ever had walk through here, which when you look at OU producing guys like Lane Johnson, Trent Williams, the list goes on so deep. And Beatenbo's pretty much saying, yeah, these guys have everything it takes to be better than those guys. That's got to be uplifting, even if they aren't game 1 starters. You get games like Illinois State Temple. Those are going to be kind of 2 experimental games where you can do a lot of different things with the line, see where everybody slots in, what the best combinations are. That's just got to be very encouraging for OU fans that after it was such a weak point last year, it has the potential to be really good this year.
Quick interjection for you, historically speaking, because that's all I got left for me is the history that I've lived covering this program, right? On Trent Williams, who's the best offensive tackle of the generation, and on Lane Johnson, who's the best right tackle of the past generation. It's amazing. Beatenbo coached one of those guys, but here's what's amazing about it. Trent showed up as a 3-star freshman from Longview, Texas, whose team never threw the football, right? Malcolm Kelly was on that team, and he was a wide receiver. He never had any catches. Basically, he was the only option. They ran the football all the time at Longview back then. Lane Johnson shows up as a quarterback, and he shifts from left tackle to defensive tackle to right tackle to tight end, back to tackle. And these are generational guys. So offensive line can get a little weird when you're evaluating talent, especially long term.
Well, and it feels like how many times, and not to, pick on guys and stuff like that, but whether it just be what you have to do, the freak you have to be that size and also that flexible, and what's inside you. You've had guys like a Bray Walker that comes in highly touted, stuff like that, and for whatever reason just never works out on the field. That's the thing, that it's like you were saying, Carson, from the second we talked to those guys, and we talked to Fasusi and Fodje all the way back last winter, or I guess February. Is that winter still? Who cares? And Fasusi is just like I love Bill Beanbo. Coach me, I dare you. Like, please coach me. And Ryan Fodje talking about when he was headed to his high school all-star game, and they said, "Hey, can you play center?" He's like, "Yeah, dog. Does that mean I get to play football?" Two thumbs up. And a guy that recruited as a tackle, playing guard. The way I just look at this team, I feel really good about the defense. It truly, to me, feels like the difference between a team that scrapes to 8-4 and everything's safe and it's fine and it's stabilized versus a team that could really make some noises. What is this offensive line going to be? I feel like if you give John Mateer time to operate, he's going to make plays happen that aren't there. If you give Jay Knott just a little bit of room so that he's not having to shake a guy in the backfield and stuff like that, then that's the spot you want to be. And it goes back to something that Hoover knows, as I wrote this like a month and a half, 2 months ago. It's for Brent Venables, with his job on the line, he turned the keys over to a young guy, right, on the offense. Bill Beanbo, I don't think it's like job on the line, but this season, the staff, everything's on the line. I'm sorry. I want to see more Fasusi and less Jacob Sexton. We've seen some Jacob Sexton, and I know that Bill Beanbo said that the first 3 or 4 days were his best pass sets that he's ever seen. Like, great. If he wants to play guard, 2 thumbs up. Fabechi Wiwu, a guy I've been really, really hard on. Bill Beanbo talks about his body's changed, all that stuff. That's great. That's great. If you want to keep Fabechi and somehow find Fodje or Eddie Pierre-Louis into the lineup, that's great. But if you're talking about this team reaching their ceiling, Michael Fasusi needs to start against LSU. If this team's going to reach their ceiling, Eddie Pierre-Louis or Ryan Fodje needs to be one of those guards against Missouri. And I'm totally with it if you want to give him a ton of time against Illinois State and then peel that back a little bit against Michigan. Then give him a little bit more time against Temple and maybe a little bit more time against Auburn. And then just really throw him in there against Texas. Like, I'm not going to freak out if they're not playing a ton week 2. But by the time that second bye week rolls around and you're going to Tuscaloosa, if you haven't given those guys plenty of time to raise their level and be big time contributors, then I think you're just looking at a fine offensive line that's not going to carry you to the places where I know we're talking about save job versus the Oklahoma standard. But if you're talking about it's Oklahoma, you need to be in a playoff fight because it's Oklahoma, regardless of what happened a year ago. You need to see a lot of Fasusi and probably a lot of Fodje. And that's, maybe I'm off base on that, but that's kind of how I look at that, because Fasusi and Fodje sound like they are answering the bell at practice here in fall camp.
Yeah, those guys need to play. You're right, a lot for them to have the maximum 2026. Let's say those guys have to play a lot in 2025.
Yeah. So Bill Beanbo talked a bit about Eddie Pierre-Louis. He had said basically the aggression's great, but it's got to be controlled. Kind of what Eddie was talking to us about a couple weeks ago when you're pairing that technique. He had good stuff to say about Sexton and Fabechi, as we said. So if you're interested in everything Bill Beanbo, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, hit the football tab, scroll a little bit. That's up there. You can also hit us up on Hoover's YouTube page at John Hoover Media. Just search that, fire it in there. And tucked away, Bill Beanbo did talk a little bit about Ben Arbuckle, a little bit about Kevin Wilson. And he brought out the words that every Oklahoma fan either is like, okay, I get that, or is like, I understand what you're saying, but maybe you could have used something different. Bill even couched it. He's like, I know you guys are not going to like this. He was asked about Ben Arbuckle, but he reminds me a lot of Lincoln. Really young, great command of everything. And as long as Bob Stoops doesn't come back, retire, hand the keys over to Ben Arbuckle, and he coaches at USC in 5 years, I think that everyone's going to be okay with Ben Arbuckle being Lincoln Riley 2.0, the offensive coordinator, Carson.
Yeah, no, they absolutely would. This time, Alex Grinch not being the defensive coordinator. Hopefully, they could be competent on both sides of the ball. But Arbuckle, I mean, there is rightfully so much juice. I know, obviously, we talked about this a couple weeks ago on the podcast, that he seems so confident at the press conference the day before camp began, which I highlighted. That's what you want to see from someone that is so young, coming from a smaller program. That's what you want to see. Not that you're in over your head, not that you're this business like I was saying, Brent Venables. I thought it was actually kind of good that he was a little bit on edge that day, a little bit more like, yeah, this is business. Arbuckle was so laid back, though. That's the energy you want to see. And that just seems like his personality out there. Definitely fierce. I know that some of the practices we've been to very much not aggressive, I don't know what the right word is, but very commanding, demanding a lot from his players, which this offense needs after what it had last year. And I'm just really excited to see what kind of unique things this guy brings to OU, whether it is very similar to what we saw at Washington State. I feel like you've got to change some things to have a really elite offense in the SEC. It really is a different sport playing a modified Mountain West schedule than an SEC schedule, but I'm curious to see what that looks like, and I think we'll get a pretty good dose of that when they play Illinois State.
Ryan, this feels like what Oklahoma City Thunder fans would feel if Sam Presti made a comparison to tell us how great someone on the team is currently, right? Let's just say Shea, and uses the analogy of, well, he reminds me of Kevin Durant. You would say Thunder fans would go, it burns, it burns. I know what you mean, but it burns, especially this week.
It's been interesting just to see the. I think everyone understands what Bill's saying, right? About, hey, the offensive line, all that stuff. It's still just funny to see everyone kind of it. They know what's happening and no one's upset about it, but just a little wince. You can tell everyone be like, yeah, Lincoln, yeah, sorry, my bad. Need to clear everything out here. Plus, I was looking at it, and I've done this before with Bill, but I mean, just those Texas Tech staffs he coached alongside Lincoln, obviously at two different moments, but under Mike Leach with Dana Holgerson, Sonny Dykes. He had Jake Spavital as his quarterbacks coach when he was at West Virginia. Bill Bedenbaugh, if there's someone that's going to give a review of offensive minds and command of the offense, I'm just going to go ahead and give 2 thumbs up to Bill Bedenbaugh because he knows what exactly it looks like. And he especially has seen it at different phases in the career, right? Lincoln just coming in, calling plays, or Sonny and Dana being a couple of years on. It's just Bill Bedenbaugh's had a little bit of a charmed life with some of the offenses that he's worked with, but it's also, you flip it around, some of those offenses he's worked with, very, very good because Bill Bedenbaugh is handing them great offensive lines to work with.
Yeah, totally agree.
Let's flip things over to the other side of the ball. If you'd like to, again, we had the Bill video up. We also talked to Fasusi and Fodje. I sat with Fasusi for about 7.5 minutes. If you want to see all of that, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. Fasusi, always a great interview. Another guy we talked to on Monday was Danny Okoye. Danny's always pretty well-spoken, pretty soft-spoken. We talked about Danny with Miguel Chavis last week as well, who Miguel basically said that guy's going to be a household name here pretty soon. Danny looks fantastic. Let me take the half step back, though. For a guy that just played in a couple of games last year, straight up 2 games, let's go around the horn. Who first hack at it? What do you think is like a realistic expectation for a guy like Danny Okoye this year as he steps up in and really embraces a role in this defense for the first time?
Yeah, he had such a small role last year as a true freshman, but everybody who's ever seen him play or knows his background knows what an incredible athlete he is. And when I say athlete, I don't mean big, strong, fast. Everybody's big, strong, fast. I mean somebody like we've said several times about Jacoby Johnson, right? He's a Division I basketball player, basically, right? He could play offense. He could play defense. I think that's what Okoye is. I think Okoye, the couple of times that I saw him in high school, defensive end, tight end, no big deal there, right? Inside linebacker, it's a little bit different. Wide receiver, yeah, and punter. The guy was all over the field, literally, and he was the best at every position he was playing. He's got that kind of talent, that kind of versatility, that kind of just explosiveness at various positions where he could fill in as a spinner defensive end, where he comes in a pass rush situation over the center guard gap, for instance. Or he's an edge rusher, traditional edge rusher off the edge if our Mason Thomas needs a break. Or, hey, guess what? You've lost 2 linebackers to a sprained ankle this game. He's going to have to go back and get some reps there. He's athletic enough to do that. I'm not saying they're training him to do that, but he is athletic enough and has enough experience in a high school setting to be able to say, Coach, I can get you 3 snaps or 6 snaps this drive of linebacker if you need me to. He's that good. That's why Brent says pound for pound the best athlete on the team. So yeah, no, I'd like to see him have a larger role this year and kind of explore some of the things he can contribute.
Yeah, kind of just going off of what Hoove said, I think what I've struggled to wrap my head around when we've talked about PJ, Taylor Wine, all these guys that the coaches are praising, they've talked about their improvement. How are they going to get playing time with how good this defensive end group is? That's, believe me, that's a good problem to have with R. Mason Thomas, Marvin Jones Jr., assuming he lives up to what he can live up to. But I agree with who the versatility should be something that is utilized for him because athletically it's all there. Everything that we know about Danny Okoye is that he is one of the better athletes. I think Brent said he is maybe pound for pound the best athlete on the team. So getting that kind of praise, maybe try him out at a linebacker position, something like that. See what this guy can do, even if he's not getting those first team defensive end reps. But again, really just interested to see how the reps are split up this year between him, PJ, Taylor Wine. We've heard so much, we've written so much about Taylor Wine at this point about how he's gotten so much better. But what I like to hear, what really encouraged me talking to Danny was how much he said his mental game, learning about the sport has improved. Because, like we said, the physical stuff, his gifts there, those have always been there since he's been at OU. But he talked about how he learned from Ethan Downs, or Mason Thomas, some of the other big defensive players on OU's roster. And he said that's just helped his understanding of the game grow so much. So that encourages me that whenever it's hard to say what his role is going to look like, whenever he gets called upon, he's going to be good.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, of all the guys on the defensive line, R. Mason Thomas is an every down guy. Duh, we know that. 9.5 sacks last year, all that. But is it simply going to be that Danny and Taylor Wine have taken enough steps forward to only be like, hey, this Oklahoma run defense should be really good again. Jaden Jackson and Dominic Williams are going to ensure that on early downs, no one's going to be running Oklahoma. So does that mean that Danny Okoye, he's going to have a lot of third and longs, and we only see him on third and long, and everybody just knows what's coming at you? How much is Marvin Jones Jr. going to be able to be an every down guy versus an early down guy just because you know he'll be in the right spot? It sounds like he's kind of picked up here in camp. Like what those combinations look like, just because last year, Oklahoma kind of had the rare, since 2011, just purely because I got bored going back and pulling data. About half the time, a little under half the time, they've had a pair of guys that have had 5 or more sacks. Last year, though, was the rare moment where Grayson Halton is that second guy. Like R. Mason had 9.5, Grayson Halton had 5. Usually, we're talking about like in 21, Isaiah Thomas, Nick Benito. Isaiah had 8, Nick had 7, and Isaiah was going inside out, basically playing all over the place. You talk about the days of like Jalen Redmond and Ronnie Perkins in 2019, both those guys getting over 5 sacks. I think it'd be good to see the last time you had 3 guys over the 5 sack mark was 2015, Striker Tapper and Charles Walker. Then you have to go back to when Brent Venables was the defensive coordinator, back closer to the 2010s. So I'm just kind of interested to see how that's going to play out. Is it going to be that Oklahoma has the depth, but they have depth as in like this guy plays first and second down, this guy's a third down specialist, stuff like that, or have those guys grown enough with like a PJ and a Marvin Jones that you have a couple of 3 down guys? A little extra credit. We'll toss this over to Hoove. Hoove, do you happen off the top of the dome to know the last time Oklahoma had a double-digit sack getter in this defense?
Eric Stryker?
Nope, Striker never hit 10.
Okay.
We got 9 and 14. Obo also got 9 and 16.
I was going to say Obo. How about went to the Patriots? I was just thinking about him a couple days ago. Geno Grissom? No.
No, Ronnie. Are you thinking about Ronnie Perkins? Maybe.
No. Geno Grissom played for the Patriots there for a couple of years. He had the big touchdown in the Sugar Bowl against Alabama.
Yeah, let's go all the way back to 2009.
Wow.
A marking that we often use is maybe the last like elite Oklahoma defense. They were kind of putting that spot that the OU defense was last year. Mr. Beal with 11 sacks coming off, ripping off. So here would be my like number one. R. Mason Thomas needs to break that streak this year, and then number 2, who else is coming in off the edge to help everybody out? I think that would be huge if this Oklahoma defensive line wants to live up to the Cole Kublik best defensive line in the country, best defensive line in the SEC, at least stuff like that. it's great to not be able to get, moved in the running game, but to take this thing to the next level, they're going to need to be able to hunt down opposing quarterbacks and help out a young secondary, even though it sounds like those guys in the secondary are performing really well.
Frank Anderson, what's his name? Anderson?
Frank Alexander?
Frank Alexander. Yeah. Also played, I think, for the Cowboys for a little bit. He would have been on my list of guesses before we got all the way back to Jeremy Beal. Wow.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute, and it's no coincidence, I think, that the moment that Brent Venables leaves, we're starting to go like, oh, there are a couple years where just one guy gets to 5 sacks or stuff
Yeah.
like that. We talk about the young piece in the secondary a lot, gentlemen. It's easy to forget about maybe one of the other former 5-star recruits on this defense, Peyton Bowen. We got to talk to Peyton on Monday as well, and I was telling Eddie and Bob this on radio this morning. Peyton Bowen's that guy for me that he's going to have to graduate before I quit Peyton Bowen, before I just am done with believing that Peyton Bowen's going to come in and be an impact player. The big theme, I think, from what he was talking about is that, again, he was dealing with the foot all year last year. He played in all 13 games. He was not close to 100%. Still, he only had 2 less tackles than he did his freshman season. And Carson, he was talking about, on one hand, really, really hard to like just sit out the spring and just say, I get it, I'm going to sit over here and heal up. But how important that's been, because it's really been since his junior year of high school that he's been fully healthy as he kind of battles Reggie Powers for that other safety spot alongside Robert Spears-Jennings.
I really think mentally and physically there's a lot of benefit to not playing during the spring for a guy like Peyton Bowen, because then you kind of start to just have those negative thoughts, that negative self-talk of, oh, I'm an injury-prone player. I'm this, I'm that. And I'm not sure I wasn't in that scrum with you at Peyton Bowen. I was, I think, interviewing Carson Kent at that point. But I don't know enough about his mental to know if he is someone that would internalize something like that. But Peyton Bowen, I think after an off season of not playing a whole lot, not playing in the spring, I think there's a lot of benefit that can kind of come in reinstalling some of that confidence. Like, hey, I am really good at this sport. I was a 5-star recruit for a reason. Me and my brother now have this chemistry on this defense that can be really good, obviously, with Eli Bowen receiving freshman All-American honors last year. There's a lot of good that can be done, and obviously he's going to be a big player in this defense. Now that he's healthy, I think we could see a big playmaker.
Yeah, he's so good at the game of football. He's so reliable, Peyton Bowen is, and for him to fill in behind that spot behind Billy Bowman, it's a huge opportunity for a very seamless transition for Brent Venables in the Oklahoma defense, because he's so smart. He might have the highest football IQ on the entire defense. So he's just so smart, and he gets everything. You throw something at him, and Brent says he picks it up immediately. So pretty important for him to be back and healthy like this.
And also, if you're talking about a young secondary too, it's something that Peyton said as well, that I had asked him like just how much more instinctual, how much faster things go. And he's like, the mental part of it never been like a big, huge issue. It's just that his freshman year, they were moving him around, cheetah,
Yep.
safety, all that stuff. And now because of that, he learned the whole defense. And he said, so if Kendall Daniels turns around to me, who's not played 3 years in this defense, is like, what do I got? Peyton can just say, him, right there, that stuff. Same thing with, especially if you're rolling through young corners like Devon Jordan and Cortland Guillory and Jeremiah Newcomb on his side of the field. Should be an easy, hey, you can turn to Peyton Bowen. Peyton Bowen knows exactly where you need to be, where he needs to be. And he talked about, too, that that's been a big piece of this offseason, is that there were a bunch of guys that watched Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman lead the defense, and everyone's doing it their own way, but having a bunch of guys to watch them be the example of leadership has been good for this defense. It certainly sounds like things continue to go well for the Oklahoma defense throughout spring football. We had the other big news item of the week come down, the AP poll, preseason AP poll. We will give all of our predictions on the world famous prediction special for the Sooners on SI podcast. As we always say, you will never find a more accurate prediction show. We've certainly not had CFP participants go down in literal week 1 based off of how we have predicted things. So we'll do a little bit of that, but it was the general AP's turn. This is very, very similar to the coaches poll. Oklahoma in this poll, 18th in the AP poll. They came in unofficially at 26th in the coaches poll. That means every year since 2000, the Sooners have been in the poll. That's their second longest streak in program history. I believe creeping up on their other one. I think it was 29 years in a row was the previous streak. So somewhere in there, my number may be 1 or 2 years off. So you got that. Michigan was at number 14. Oklahoma and South Carolina are tied for the longest streak of games against teams ranked in the preseason top 25, if that makes sense. Starting at Texas, Oklahoma plays 5 straight. South Carolina plays 5 straight. Once they enter SEC play, that'll move and shake, all that stuff. The schedule's tough. We all knew this. It's just further reinforcement, I suppose. But there you go. We had that come down. Who do you have any other news and nuggets on the AP poll? I know you were the historian doing some AP poll research. Not that the AP poll really matters in the preseason, especially, but hey, it's numbers, it's history, and it just shows year by year trends.
Yeah, it's always that's the word I was going to use, trends. It's always an indicator. The AP preseason poll is always an indicator. And every year you see, previously I think it was Dennis Dodd or Brett McMurphy or somebody coming out saying, national writer saying, here's a little history. Every year, it's like 22 years in a row, a team has started in the top 10 and finished unranked. Yeah, that happens. Absolutely happens. These are anomalies, and we're rolling the dice on a preseason, returning starters and now transfer portal arrivals and all that. But it's also something like 7 years in a row, the national champion has been crowned after starting the preseason in the top 7 or higher, like 7 years in a row, or top 5 or higher, something like that. There's some mathematical matrix there where the national champion every year has come from the top of the AP poll, preseason poll. So you can't tell me it doesn't mean nothing. Or that's like a triple negative. You can't tell me it doesn't mean anything.
It's one of those things that, is it the Bible? Is it the end all be all? No, but your national champion probably coming from out of that top 6 or 7. Congratulations to the Texas Longhorns. They had 2 distinctions on Monday. First time in program history, they were preseason number 1. Also, they became the first preseason number 1 to be an underdog leading into week 1. There's still time for that line to move and all that stuff, but the number 3 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes, there was some movement, and now they're 1.5 favorites when
incredible
the shooter.
Well over 100 years of football, and everybody has been putting out these blue blood lists. I think Pat Fodje put one out this week. Texas is one of college football's 8 blue bloods. It's undebatable. You cannot debate that Texas is one of the top 8 historical. They've never been number 1 in the preseason. That is shocking to me. How do you call yourself a blue blood? How do you say you're this when you've never been preseason number 1 since 1936? Well, since 1960, I guess, is when the preseason poll started. It's amazing. So yeah, congrats to Texas. Hats off. Holy cow. I wouldn't have thought that.
It's a poor returns for a blue blood, but
it's a lot of money to never have a preseason number 1 team. It's a lot of money spent on various things.
We can go to our resident A&M grad. Thoughts on the Texas Longhorns?
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it is weird to see them at that number since 2005. This has been a disappointing program. I agree with what Hoover said. Blue blood program, a ton of history, but they had maybe not to as dramatic of a level, but kind of fallen into that Nebraska territory of all this money spent, all of this history, and not a whole lot to show for it. I mean, OU hasn't won a natty since 2000, sure, but look at all their Big 12 titles they've won. Look at all their double-digit win seasons. Since 2005, UT really hasn't done that except for the last 2 years. And it's a little odd. I mean, I obviously didn't have a vote in this. I think it's hard to bet against a team like Ohio State that's won the national title. Obviously, quarterback questions, but that's a talented team led by a really good football coach. And it's hard to say that the preseason AP top 25 means a whole lot, especially for a team like Oklahoma that has high ceiling, low floor. There are a lot of teams in the rankings that, if I look, for example, 17-19, Kansas State, Texas A&M. I feel like those are both teams with higher floors and lower ceilings. So it's easier to put those teams like, okay, 17 for Kansas State. That makes a lot of sense. 19 for A&M. That makes a lot of sense. OU is a team that they could be top 10 by the end of the year. They could be way out of the rankings at the end of the year with all the different ways that this season could go. So many questions. So from an OU perspective, I actually get it that they're ranked in one poll and they're not ranked in the other. It makes a lot of sense to me. Obviously, we have 12 regular season games in front of us to shake all that out. That's the beauty of the sport. Preseason rankings don't really mean a whole lot.
Ryan,
Me too.
this is a byproduct, the latest byproduct of having a guy with the last name of Manning as your quarterback. Arch, I'm not going to say he's overrated, but he hasn't done anything. And yet all of a sudden Texas Longhorns, for the first time in 120, 50 years of history, whatever, preseason number one. It's because it's part of the Arch Manning hype train. And I'm not saying he's overrated. He might be great. He might be the best Manning of them all, but we don't know because he hasn't done anything yet.
I just want to see, and I'm not saying like I'm doubting the Texas offensive line or things like that, but the Steve Sarkisian has brought the way back from where Texas has been as far as consistency in a 2-year situation. Now you graduated a lot of those guys. A lot of those guys were part of the pancake factory. Remember when NIL opened up and Texas wisely said we need to invest in the line of scrimmage? That's what's been lacking. It's one thing to develop those guys through. Now it's another thing to show were you able to stack it and replenish. That's what, if you want to get to the level that Alabama was and that Georgia is and all that stuff, it becomes you've got to have 3 guys waiting in the wings who are just as impressive as that. And so that's the next task for me for Texas is like, you've shown that you can make it to a college football playoff. You've shown that you can, mix it up and all that stuff. Now you've got to replace that generation of guys and stay at that really high level. That's something Bob Stoops was really, really good at for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
So we will see there from one OU opponent. Can we do a brief check-in on another one just real quick before we get out? Auburn. All of our Auburn friends that are out there. Is Hugh Freeze going to make it to the Georgia game? This has been one of, for me, the worst off seasons from just a coach saying stuff at the podium. And I'm not talking about like the Dave Aranda like coach saying stuff at the podium from the Texas High School Football Coaches Convention. So we had Hugh Freeze openly admit at SEC Media Day, and then he doubled down on this when Auburn regrouped that he told his defensive coordinator, like, hey, let's simplify some things because we need to build Jackson Arnold's confidence up. I don't have like the biggest issue with that. I also would not be caught dead saying that out loud in front of a microphone, certainly not at media day where like it's only media people there. Then he was asked about play calling yesterday, and he basically said, yeah, we're going to divvy up the duties. We got one guy that's doing our first down strategy. We've got another guy that's doing our third down play calling strategy. Second down was just not addressed. I guess it doesn't really matter. Hugh Freeze has the ability to overrule at any point whatsoever. Gentlemen, let me rephrase their schedule in a way that I think that let's all think about this. So it's a big, big year for Jackson Arnold. Hugh Freeze is on the same kind of hot seat that Brent Venables is. Jackson, a guy that needs confidence to be rebuilt. These are the defensive minds. Let's think about it this way, not just teams and names. These are the defensive coordinators that Hugh Freeze, with his 7 cooks in the kitchen strategy plus confidence Jackson Arnold, let's simplify things. He is at a Dave Aranda defense in week 1. They then have cupcake. He is then at a Brent Venables defense in week 4, at a Mike Elko defense in week 5, the bye week, and then he hosts a Kirby Smart defense in week 6 or week 7 after the bye. So you're at Aranda, at Venables, at Elko, bye week, hosting Kirby Smart. I mean, if we're building like the 5 or 6 best defensive coordinators of the last 10 years, all 4 of those guys are going to be on it, and we don't have clarity in the play calling, and we're dumbing down the scout team. Not even the scout team, the ones when you're good. This is going to be a disaster for Auburn. I would be stunned if they walk out of this with more than they're going to get their 2 cupcake wins. I don't think they're going 3-3. I just don't see it, boys.
Yeah, was it yesterday or day before that he came out and said this, that Derek Nix is going to call plays on first down and Kent Austin is going to call plays on second down. They have new titles: first down strategy coach for play callings, third down strategy coach for play calling. He did say that for the most part, he was going to have the authority to overrule first down and third down. Also, Hugh Freeze might be calling plays himself on second down. You might have three. Jackson Arnold might have three different play callers in his ear on the course of one drive. My question is this: if there's a defensive penalty, right, and maybe you're hoping that it gets declined, or if you're the other guy, you're hoping it gets accepted so you can call the next play, or so maybe you don't have to call the next play. What a disaster. What an absolute abject disaster this is going to be. And by the way, you're talking about Auburn. We just talked about the AP poll. School record for Auburn this week, preseason poll. 55th consecutive week in the AP poll that they have been unranked. They just set a new school record. So I wonder why that happened.
Auburn, I think they're a weird thing for me because even before these recent comments by Hugh Freeze, I've not been buying the hype of they're going to be magically this great team. Yes, they brought in an awesome receiving corps, one of the best in college football, hands down. Jackson Arnold, he has to prove himself. They have a good line, so Jackson Arnold has all the tools. It's discouraging to hear everything that Hugh Freeze has been saying, though, about having to dumb down certain things. Auburn, I mean, this is not just a big season for Jackson Arnold. It's a big season for the program. You look at how deep the SEC is and the combination it has between traditional blue bloods like Bama, Georgia, OU, Texas, and then schools that are kind of money pits like Tennessee, A&M. Like, you kind of have to be one of those two things to be good in this conference. And Auburn, I mean, they have some good history. They won a national championship with Cam Newton. They have not sustained that success. They've frankly been bad under Hugh Freeze. And I think they're kind of in danger of kind of reaching a level like Mississippi State, like some success in the 2010s early, but how are they going to keep up with the rest of the competition in this stacked conference? It worries me. It worries me for their program. Obviously, having to go through a new coach after this season would not be ideal, but Hugh Freeze is, by the day, seeming like he's not going to be their long-term guy.
Good luck to all of our friends on the plains. We enjoyed our trip last year. We welcome you to open arms to Norman America here in week 4. Speaking of Mississippi State, family back on the menu. Good job. 2 thumbs up to everybody involved there. And we'll leave it at that. You know what this reminds me of, Hoove, the Auburn situation? This is if you had 3 Ted Roofs on one staff to just basically be like, yeah, Ted's calling the defense. No, he's not. Ted Roof is not calling the defense.
Is this desperation? Or is it delegation, right? You call plays on first down. You call plays on third down. We'll figure out second down at some point. It's desperation. He's trying to delegate, but no, this is disorganization and desperation at its worst.
It's I can't wait to see it. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we don't have to wait because Friday night of week 1, that is going to be 2 weeks from Friday. So we're 16 days out from Auburn making the trek down to Waco. We'll get Auburn and Baylor on night 1. We'll get Georgia Tech in Colorado. We'll talk about Georgia Tech next week because they're headed to the college football playoff. You heard it here first. No, not picking that, but they will be.
If you go back and look at Jackson Arnold's third down efficiency last year, how is that at all fair for your third down coach to get that? That's your quarterback. Oh, that's not going to work.
Auburn. The fast food moguls are going to have to be cashing some checks, I fear, or are writing some checks here come November. All right, that's all the damage, quite literally damage, that we can do today. Like I said, we'll be back next week where I will tell you why Georgia Tech and Clemson will rematch in the ACC championship game. Haynes King is sleeping at Bobby Dodd Stadium right now, which, I mean, John Mateer, your move. If you're not sleeping at the Switzer Center, do you care enough about football? We will have our prediction special. We will predict Oklahoma's record officially. We'll go on the record. We'll pick all the conference championship games. As of last year, I'm not going to make us do a full college football playoff, but we'll pick our group of 5 representative. And obviously, everything that happens in Norman. They've got a scrimmage this week. Their situational stuff. They'll get the young Bucks scrimmaging out there before they split things off into first team, second team, scout team, all that fun stuff. Obviously, we'll be on top of all that. We got interviews on Friday, so we'll be back out on the practice field on Friday. So look for those to start to hit the site at about 1:30-ish is usually by the time that we get done and out of there. And you can find those at Hoover's YouTube page, John Hoover Media, as well as the website, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. Let's see. Today, you got, Carson, you wrote about Jeremiah Newcomb. And who else do you have coming to the site today? My mind's in a blender.
Jaden Hardy.
Jaden Hardy. There we go. So, yeah, Jaden Hardy and Jeremiah Newcomb. I wrote about Peyton Bowen today. If you would like to go back and read all the VenmoGate stuff, it's all there. If you'd like, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, as well as a ton more content coming at you all season long. Gentlemen, have we missed anything before we dip out?
The predictions episode next time, what could possibly go wrong?
Hey, we've never ever had someone pick like North Carolina to go to the CFP and then like lose in week one because Sam Howell is awful. That's never happened. We are always right. You might as well just take that podcast episode next week straight to Las Vegas because that is where you will lose all your money if you listen to us. All right. We will talk to you guys next week. For Carson Field, for John Hoover, I am Ryan Chapman. Go hit the site, go hit the YouTube, and until next time, we will talk to you next Wednesday.